We're talking about modes of thinking in general, like doubting, affirming, denying, willing, understanding, imagining, and so on. The non-thinking activities like I am walking are not sufficient to affirm my existence. No mind-body dualism. The success of the cogito does not presuppose mind-body dualism. Inference or intuition, the I think, therefore I exist, should not be looked as a syllogism, existence being deduced from thought, but as a self-evident principle. I reference. The I in the I think should not be presupposed for the existence of a substantial self. Its only reference is to a thinking thing. Descartes' truth and error. Descartes tells us that there is little known about the material things in comparison to the human mind and God himself. Hence we need to disengage our minds from the contemplation of the imaginable objects and apply it on the thing that is purely intelligible, that is God. It is impossible for a God that is all-perfect and powerful to deceive me, for in fraud and deceit there is imperfection. Also, he has endowed me with faculties that are perfect, though limited by my finiteness. So the question arises, if I do not have faulty faculties and am not deceived, why do I err? When I think only of God, I am in truth. Everything is clear and distinct, and I discover no cause from error or falsity. However, given my limited nature, the moment I turn the gaze from God to myself, I tend to lose my way and make errors. I possess both a real and positive idea of God and a negative idea of nothing. Hence I am a mean between the extremes of nothingness and God. Thus in truth, I also have a nothing to lead me to error. God does not need to place a faulty faculty to lead me to error. So even though I have a capacity to discern between truth and error, it is not infinite-like in a perfect way. The discernment of truth and error, or judging, depends on two faculties, understanding and will. In using understanding alone, I am merely apprehending the ideas regarding which I may form a judgment. My will have to affirm or deny, pursue or shun this information in order for me to make a judgment. The error is caused when the will is not restrained. It has a wider range than understanding, and it extends to things that we do not understand. The moment we affirm or deny things that are not clear and distinct to understanding, we fall into error or sin. Thus if I abstain from judging, when I do conceive things with sufficient when I do not conceive things with sufficient clarity and distinctness, I act rightly and am not deceived. Now even if my will affirms or denies ideas that the understanding finds not clear and distinct, but then by chance I stumble upon truth, I cannot therefore escape wrong views of my freedom of will. Possession of this freedom is not something I need to be repugnant about, but when used in unity with God, that is, when I see things clearly and not in doubt, I am inclined to go with my understanding. God disposes my indifference and my will, and enables me to choose freely the truth and good. What am I? Descartes starts his enquiry from being a body comprising of face, arms, legs, and the other bodily members. Then he asks if he is a soul, because nourishment through food, perception, and thought were attributed to it. As he supposes that there exists this all-powerful, malicious deceiver being, the existence of the bodily members in me cannot be established. Hence he cannot be a body. The functioning of the soul, nourishment, sensing, requires a body, hence he cannot be any of them too. But what then am I? A thing which thinks? What is a thing which thinks? Descartes discovered that we are a thing which doubts, understands, affirms, denies, wills, refuses, and which also imagines and feels. Every time any of these things occur, their existence, and therefore my existence, is certain. This thinking thing is not a body, but a mind or soul. Now it could be possible that nothing I imagine may be true. Still, the power of imagination will not cease to exist in me. I am also the same being who perceives things through the sense organs, since I can feel the heat, see the light, hear the noise, and touch the stone. These perceptions could be said false, and that I am dreaming. This perceiving, according to Descartes, is thinking. One of the objections against Descartes is that he made a real distinction between mind or soul and the body, even though he did not yet prove that the corporeal things cannot think. One of the assumptions that he makes in the second meditation is that thinking requires a thinker. He explains this by asserting that no thought can exist apart from a thing that thinks, just like no accident can be without a substance in which to exist. Existence of the soul. In matters of morality, one must sometimes follow opinions that are uncertain, just as if they were indubitable. However, in order to explore the truth, we need to do something that is the exact opposite, that is, reject everything that has the least amount of doubt. I could pretend that I did not have a body, that the external world did not exist. However, I could not pretend that I did not exist. On the contrary, the thought of doubting the truth in everything was the reason for my existence. Thus I am a substance whose nature or essence is simply to think. It does not need any place or material thing. We can therefore say that the I in I think, therefore I am, is a soul, and it can exist without the body, such that even if the body is not there, it does not cease to be all that it is. General criterion for certainty. For Descartes, the truth in the proposition I think, therefore I am, is ascertained by the fact that he can see clearly and distinctly that which is affirmed. Hence the general rule in things that are conceived clearly and distinctly are true. What is meant by conceived clearly and distinctly? Descartes tells us, I call that clear which is present and apparent to an attentive mind, in the same way as we assert that we see objects clearly when being present to the beholding eye, they operate upon it with sufficient strength. We have to distinguish between clarity and distinctness. A city of pain, for example, could be very clearly perceived. However, we can make false judgments regarding its nature. Hence our perception could be clear without being distinct. On the other hand, anything that is distinct presupposes that it is clear. Descartes, having discovered the criterion for truth, faced a couple of challenges in its application. First, which are those things that we clearly and distinctly perceive? Second, God must have endowed me with a nature in which I am being deceived, even in things that seem to be clear and distinct in their manifestation. In order for him to overcome this challenge, he had to prove the existence of God, who is not a deceiver. Ideas. Thoughts that are images of things are called ideas. We can think of the idea of a man, car, flying horse, God, sky, chimera, or angel. If the ideas are considered in themselves and are not associated with anything external, they can properly not be called false. Error occurs in judging that the idea in us is conformed to something that is external to us. There are three kinds of ideas, namely innate, adventitious, and fictitious. Innate ideas are those whose contents can be accounted for my appealing to its nature. For instance, he is a thinking thing that exists. The origin of the contents of this idea can be traced back to the fact of his nature. Adventitious ideas are derived from things existing outside me. For instance, I feel the heat, or hear noise, are sensations that proceed from things external to me. Factitious ideas are the inventions of my own mind, like sirens, hippogriffs, or unicorns. Descartes recognizes at least three innate ideas: the idea of God, the idea of mind or the soul, and the idea of body. Existence of God. In the third meditation, Descartes begins by examining all the ideas in his mind. The ideas differ with each other in their content, some containing more objective reality than the other. There are many adventitious ideas of color, tactile quality, and so on. They may have been produced by myself. Then there are ideas like substance and duration, may have been derived from the ideas that I have of myself. We have the idea of God. By the name of God, I understand the substance which is infinite, independent, all-knowing, all-powerful, and by which I myself and everything else, if anything else exists, have been created. This cannot be produced by myself. According to Descartes, this idea of the infinite is not from a negative idea stemming from my finitude, but from the fact that I see clearly that there is more reality in the infinite than the finite substance. For I recognize my limitation and imperfection by comparing myself to the perfect being. Can I, who possess the idea of the perfect being, exist without its existence? Descartes argues that if I was the cause for my own existence and the cause of the idea of the perfect being in my mind, then I had to be the perfect being, God himself. But I know that I do not have the power of making myself, and that I depend on a being different from myself. This being that is different from myself cannot be less than God. We know that the reality of the cause cannot be less than its effect. Thus this being must be God, or have the idea of God. If this is a being that has the idea of God, then its existence is dependent on a similar or more perfect being. In order to avoid this infinite regress, we affirm the existence of God. This is an ontological argument for the existence of God. For Descartes, this idea of God was a privileged idea, as its presence forces us to transcend ourselves, to look at the external cause, this perfect being that cannot be completely comprehended, but is nevertheless clear and distinct. Innate idea of God. According to Descartes, the idea of God is a positive idea. It could not have been derived from sense perception, nor it is a mental fiction that is variable at will. The only other alternative is that it is innate in me. It is the image and likeness of God in me, like the mark of a workman imprinted on his work. This idea is a natural and inborn capacity of the mind that is potentially rather than actually in me. In the third meditation, Descartes speaks of a knowledge of myself as a thing, which incessantly aspires after something which is better and greater than myself. This speaks of an innate potentiality that is constantly and intently looking beyond itself, as its more perfect author and creator. This idea of the perfect being, even though potentially innate, is produced as an actual idea before the idea of the self. The obstacle to the idea of the existence of God are my prejudices and the sensible things that clutter my thoughts. My nature is such that once it was